Crop Talk on Market Journal is supported by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff.
Well, let's go back, folks, to last week as we brought you this show from Commodity Classic, and it was during the show that we were starting to get lots of news on the tariff front. Of course, soybeans heavily impacted by tariffs, particularly with China. To that point, we had the chance to sit down with a representative from the US Soybean Export Council to evaluate how soybeans would possibly be impacted by tariffs, but we began by looking back on some of the history of where soybeans have gone in terms of world trade. A lot of news on this front, but maybe we should start here by going back a little bit and talking about soybean exports in particular, of where we have been, historically speaking. Bring us up to speed.
Well, soybeans is an amazing crop, and it's demanded all over the world, and it's not grown as nearly as many places around the world as, say, wheat or corn. So we've been working in international markets for over 70 years at this point. We export about 60% of the production, so exports is a really critical part of establishing the price for U.S. soybean farmers.
Historically speaking, can you look back and see when exports of soybeans really took off?
Gosh, when you look back over the history, we've always had, because the U.S. was the number one supplier and the number one grower and number one exporter. And so if you look back, starting back in the 50s, honestly, we started to see exports going out of the United States, first to Japan, then into the European Union, and it's just kind of expanded from there to where now we're sending to over 80 countries around the world. So exports really started to take off, though, in the early 2000s when China came into the marketplace, because China accounts for over 60% of global trade in soy. So you can't really think about soybeans and soybean trade over the last couple of decades without talking about China and the important role that they play.
Okay, that's where we have been.
Yeah.
Where are we at today? I think the word uncertainty comes to mind, at least for me. Same for you?
Yes, uncertainty is certainly on everyone's mind. And I think that from a trade perspective, uncertainty is a bit of the evil. You know, trade likes certainty. So with some of the uncertainty in the marketplace right now, it certainly could have an impact on soybean exports. But what we're seeing is we continue to see strong demand from the global marketplace. Has there been a little bit over the last couple of weeks with some of the talks of tariffs or reciprocal tariffs? There's been a little bit of a backing off on the U.S. Just for that risk. However, this is also the time when we start to see our exports slow down because the Brazilian crop is coming off, and so this tends to be a little bit of a tapering down of our season. We continue to remain consistent now through the rest of the year, but this is a time when we would start to see our sales go down anyway. But it's certainly, we are hearing from the international marketplace some concern about the uncertainty of what might happen as it results to tariffs.
Did you say earlier that China accounted for 60% of the soy exports from the U.S.? Did I hear you correctly? China
accounts for 60% of global trade.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little less than 40% from the U.S. Of our exports. And so part of that is, you know, during 2018 to 2020, there was a trade war, and that really pressed China to do some diversification. But at the same time, we were really looking to diversify because it's just like your stock portfolio. You don't want too much in one basket. And we had become very heavily reliant on China. And certainly we still, great customer, we want to supply China. There is still growth going on there. But we've been able to diversify our markets a little bit so that China is about 40% of our exports now, instead of at one time it was close to 60% of our exports.
Tell me more about those efforts made during the first Trump administration. Where are some of those new markets that were developed?
So we had an opportunity during that time because we became more price competitive, and we had an opportunity to go into places we had never been before. So that presents opportunity, but it also presents some challenges. So we were sending soybeans to places that the U.S. had never sent. We needed to work on some phytosanitary issues, among other things. So that was something where the USEC team was on the front line of ensuring that there was the access to those markets. So we would get exporters or importers calling and saying, hey, we want to do this trade, but there's some sort of barrier in place. You know, we don't have a phytosanitary agreement, or there's a GM approval process that's not been fully done. So how can you guys help us? So we were very busy during that time of getting all that done. This time around, there are no tariffs in place. There's been no actual trade disruption. It's just a matter of anticipating that. But I think we also are looking at, the Trump administration is looking to try and make trade fairer. And so anytime we have an opportunity to identify some areas where we might have some pinch points and then work on those, then we're certainly wanting to do that too.
We're going to the conversation, of course, where we're going here. None of us have a crystal ball to
Right.
know what's going to happen in particular. News seems to change on the daily. How can our viewers, Nebraska farmers, best prepare for perhaps any market disruptions that may come down the pipeline?
So I think that, the farmers are incredibly resilient. I'm a farmer's daughter and very proud of that fact, but I know farmers are incredibly resilient. And so I think that we've got a good base. You also can rest assured that we wake up every day and our mission, regardless of what's happening from a political environment, is to help maintain those relationships internationally so that we can, when the time is right, be able to take advantage of that. It's a challenging time for everybody, but as things start to stabilize, I think we'll see some opportunities that come out of all of these challenges. And it's just be patient for the moment. Know that we continue to wake up every day promoting your products around the world, and we're going to continue to do that regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C.